Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to today's session, which is basically a sum up of the industry trends that we've seen so far in the second quarter of this year, aiming to prepare us a little bit for what's going to happen in Q3. Give us some things to think about. So, as always, we are recording the session. If you'd like a copy of the recording, if you'd like a copy of the slides, or if you'd like a copy of the source material, just email us at sales@PharmiWeb.com, or you can reach out to us on LinkedIn as well. There is a chat function. If you have any questions or want to contribute in any way, you can just press on the chat button, type us a message, and we'll be able to see that. Or, alternative, if you'd rather do it without anyone knowing, you can email us again on sales@PharmiWeb.com. We'll be monitoring that inbox during this webinar as well. In that case, we will get started then. So, introductions. Vince, let's start with you.
Okay, so for you that have not met me before, I'm Managing Director of PharmiWeb. I've been doing this job now for about 27 years. I'm fairly well connected in the industry as to what's going on, what people are thinking, what are people's pain points, which are quite a lot at the moment. And we've decided to do this particular webinar rather than just sort of show you some slides. We've already created the document that we'll be sending out to everyone afterwards. But we just thought we'd talk around some of the major points which are causing people problems, vexing them, not quite sure what to do, and causing a bit of a slowdown, which is what we're starting to come out with now. So over to you, Simon.
Yeah, my name's Simon. I've been with PharmiWeb now for about 5 years. We've been doing webinars now for a little over 2 years, I think. So we've done quite a few. And this one's quite interesting because it's the first time we've done a webinar based off of trends that we've already got. We already make a predictions webinar at the end of every year. We look at the things that are coming up, the things that are going to be relevant. But this is very much a trial run of something that we'd like to do more often, maybe on a quarterly basis. So if you think this works as a system, please do let us know, because we will do more of them if it does work. Okay, so we've got a few things that we want to tick off today on the agenda. We're going to be looking at things like politics, the economy, drug pricing, supply chain, AI and tech, work equity, workforce demographics, generational differences, and talent. So quite a lot to cover in quite a short amount of time. So I'm going to dive right in and get started. So starting with everybody's favorite subject, politics. Currently, we're in the middle of it, aren't we, really? We've just had the European elections. The results from those are trickling in. We've got the elections in the UK coming up in, what, a week? Pretty soon. So yeah, there's quite a lot going on, and all of these things are going to have an effect on our industry in one way or another. They're going to affect things like the interest rates. They're going to affect things like funding. A huge amount goes into it. But I think, Vince, the thing I wanted to talk to you most about is the reservation across investment, particularly in acquisitions and supply at the moment, and how a lot of people are kind of sitting on their hands waiting to see what happens. You had an interesting conversation today, didn't you?
I did actually with a very large client that this is just an example of what's going on now in the market at the moment. They've been offered in excess of £100 million to develop the business, but the interest rates as they are at the moment, they can't accept that money as it currently stands. They can't refactor it in any other way. So they've got to sit and wait to see what happens with the elections. We've got to see if they can actually get the interest rates down, if we can stop the inflation. All those things are affecting everybody, and we're seeing this right the way through to the pharma companies releasing work to the CROs. We're seeing it with biotechs that can't get funding because obviously they can only get short-term investment rather than long-term, which is what they really need. And we're seeing even some of the smaller companies really thinking about, what can we do? Do we just button down our hatches and wait? We know we're coming to the end of this, but I think until we get the US elections out of the way, it's going to be still a little bit trepidatious for some of us. But I think once we get the UK elections out of the way, that'll give everyone a very clear view on what's going to happen in the future. So all of these things affect what we're doing. And I think it's actually the worst case of politics I've seen in 27 years, where it's made such a big difference all at the same time, which is why we're starting to see things as they are at the moment.
Yeah, completely agree. Another thing to consider is the unemployment rate at the moment. We just got the figures in for the UK, which was 4.4%. We got 4% in the US and then 6% in Central Europe. Do you think that when we know what's happening politically, we'll see these numbers change quite dramatically?
I don't think we'll see them change dramatically because I think those figures are indicative of the whole workforce. I think pharma and life sciences is fairly resilient, and it's the
Mm,
staff are very well trained, so they will actually find other jobs. We're not seeing that many people out of work at the moment, and if interest rates keep going up, then I think that's going to cause us even more problems. But I think as it stands at the moment, we're in a fairly good position to start climbing out of this.
agreed. So moving on to the economy, we were having a conversation around this at the moment, and I think the key thing here to discuss is the recent survey that went out. A lot of people said that economy and inflation is going to influence their strategy for the majority of the year. We've seen projects abandoned. We've seen things like estimated headcount just completely scrapped, haven't we? 36% of life science companies saying that plans have been impacted and changed just because of the state of the economy. That's big.
I think, unfortunately, this is again indicative of where we are. The world's in a very VUCA position where it's very volatile. No one really understands what's going on. All of those things are causing problems, and it's all starting with biopharma. If they can't get the
Mm,
investment they need for new products, for new discovery work, for R&D, it makes it very difficult to actually move anywhere else. And even big pharma companies, they've got very deep pockets as far as finance is concerned. But even they're holding back. Even they're thinking about what are we actually doing? What's the best way to do something? Is there a better way? And we're going to talk about some of the impacts of that as we move forward. But
yeah,
yeah, it's been a
we will.
really, really strange 6 months that I've not seen in the industry before. So quite unusual.
Mm, agreed. I think one of the other big things that we're seeing that's affecting things outside of external efforts is drug pricing. There's a lot of regulation in place at the moment, particularly things like the IRA, the PDAB. They're capping what controlling drug manufacturers can charge for their products. They're making it quite difficult for pharmaceutical companies to know exactly how much they're going to be able to charge for a drug.
Mm.
What's your take on that at the moment?
Well, I think this is probably, from my point of view, talking to clients and what they're doing, and also on the other side of our business where we do actually produce a lot of electronic details of companies. We do a lot of drug launches. They're all suffering from what do we do? What can we bring to market? Do we know what the price is going to be? Do we know if that's going to change? Do we know if we're going to be hit by inflation? And all of those things, if you're investing, multi-million pounds to bring a new product to market, you've got to be able to actually, turn that into profit. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing at the moment, talking to a lot of clients, is they're having to make decisions on which ones to bring to market where they know they can get a return. Whereas they might have cures for certain illnesses, but they can't bring them to the market. They might have
Mm,
specialty products, but they can't bring it to the market, even though we've got cures for some of these illnesses. And I think this is going to go on for a little while yet until the world calms down a little bit, until we sort things out on a global level when we're looking at, the political situation, when we're looking at how you actually deal with logistics, what your supply chain looks like, all those things are making a difference. And you're even getting hold-ups in, clinical research at the moment because, we're getting some people they're really thinking about where do we actually go and do those clinical trials because it's expensive. And then you've got other organizations and governments, Australian government, Spain, France, Latin, with Mexico, they're all vying for more clinical trials. The UK is the same. So we're all fighting for the same, trials that are out there, but not enough of trials are actually coming to market, certainly not as many as normal. So you've got a whole range of different things that are affecting all of the decision making. And I can't see it changing for, until at least the end of September, to be honest. I mean, we're hoping it's going to be earlier than that,
yeah.
especially in clinical research. But in some of these other areas, this investment's going to take a little while to kick in.
Yeah, I mean, normally we would be well underway, well within most of our trials at the moment. But we've still got people kind of gingerly touching the accelerator, don't we? There's
Yeah, I
no,
mean, a lot of the big CROs out there, they've actually won the contracts, but they've
yeah,
not been given the work. So they've won the contracts 4 months ago. So they're sat there waiting for the work to be allocated so they can actually start the projects. The projects are not starting in some cases because, dare I say it, some of the clinical trials have not gone through approval as quickly as they thought. Sometimes they haven't got the money.
Yes.
and they don't want to release it, or they don't want to risk releasing the finances to bring those products to market. This is all about timing at the current time.
And
So
going
all of
back to
these things are
interest
affecting
rates
it.
as well.
Always going back to interest rate. It's all about
Mm.
money
Mm,
currently.
absolutely. Supply chains. So yeah, we had a really interesting chat about this. I was at a conference in Ireland a few weeks ago, and supply chain was very much the flavour of the day. Obviously, Ireland sits very, very prettily in the import-export business when it comes to pharmaceuticals, drugs, med devices. But one of the things that constantly came up was the political landscape and how that's causing companies to completely rethink how they're supplying and how their whole chain looks. And you were talking to someone about this recently, weren't you?
Yeah, so this is really, we're starting to think about, are we doing the right things? Because we've got AI now that's starting to really affect manufacturing.
Mm,
But where do you actually do that? It's always going to be the human cost that's going to affect that. And then you're looking at capital costs. What do you build and where do you build it? Where's the best place? You then got to think about where are you going to distribute it from? Because if we look at the world being fairly unstable place at the moment with, wars, that actually drastically affects where you can produce drugs, where you can ship them, how you get them around, how long does it take? Something being in a ship for, 2 to 4 weeks longer than normal affects everything because that's money wrapped up that you're not actually utilizing. So what we're seeing is it's not just the cost of employees, it's the cost of the technology, it's the cost of um, where you actually go, who do you do it with? I saw a question come up there and I'll answer that very quickly. Friendshoring is where you actually use organizations that are either aligned to you or that you can work with to actually do your work for you, especially when you're looking at manufacturing and production. So, and it could be anything in there. So you might say, you start using or sharing warehouse space where you wouldn't normally do that. Those sorts of things are starting to come into play. You might actually take different routes. You might have to use warehousing in different areas, especially if you've got, cold chain products or frozen products. You've got to think about where they are, how you get them into place. And I was recently, in fact, yesterday, working on the nursing awards, and a number of companies there are actually doing the same thing. When they were, looking at COVID as an example, what could they change really quickly to adapt? And I think it's all about agility now. What can you do really quickly that's simple, that takes away your headache that you've already got? Um, and that goes from, as you see on this supply chain, from raw material right away through to the consumer.
mm.
How do you do it? How quickly do you do it? And how quickly can you get a return? Because you need that money to prop up other parts of the business.
Very much so. AI and tech, this is something that we inadvertently find ourselves talking about quite frequently, but we're not talking about it today in the sense of recruitment advertising, more so in its other applications, like we've just spoken about, supply chains, for example. So it is very much the most talked about thing when it comes to investment and budgeting for this year. 89% of companies surveyed have said that they're increasing their technology budgets over the next year, with AI being the core focus of that. So yes, recruitment firms will be looking at things like RecTech and how they can use AI to streamline that process. But then you've also got the manufacturing side of things. You've got drug discovery. You've got just about everything. But the key thing we were talking about here quite recently was a lot of the larger CROs are assembling teams of specialists, and that has an implication, doesn't it, to everyone else in the industry, Vince?
Yeah, it does. So the biggest one for me was the pull from the big management consultancies, the pull from IT companies to actually
Yeah.
put AI teams together so that we're seeing a lot of the big farmers, a lot of the big CROs all putting together these specialist teams so they can actually look at projects and how AI can actually affect them, which is great for them because they've got the money in the deep pockets to actually bring those people on board, and they're going to need them as they move forward. But for some of the smaller companies, how do they actually do that? They've got to sort of work off the back of what other people are doing. They've got to look at what other people's technologies are doing. So it just makes everything harder. I think
Mm,
from the pharma company's point of view, it's all about robotics and automation. Let's automate as much as we can, which is great for them. It's great for turning things around quickly. And some of the machinery out there and how it now works can actually change in about 2 to 3 days to, producing hundreds of thousands of pills in 1 minute and then, hundreds of thousands on something else like a
mm.
day later because they've reprogrammed the whole damn thing. So I think AI is starting to give people different insights, especially around data. What does that data actually mean? How does that affect the business? And the more information you've got to make decisions on, the better it is. And I can see that really working in pharma and life sciences around what does it actually give us? What are we doing? Is it working? Is it the right thing to do? Should we be doing something different?
Mm.
And it wouldn't surprise me if we start to see those AI teams expanding even more. I think they're relatively small at the moment with some, really key figures leading them, but I think
Yeah.
that will grow very, very quickly. I think IT will be dominant in all of the sectors and certainly in ours more than some of the others.
Fully agree with that. And when you consider the size of the budget increases that a lot of these companies are looking at, that's fully enough to start building really, really strong, large teams of people to oversee these big projects and these big shifts. Because, when you consider the implications of AI and things like regulation, you're basically changing an entire department's job, aren't you, to be more IT and AI focused, more so than book smart. So it's a huge undertaking they're looking at.
Yeah, and it's different generations that working on us. We're going to talk about multi-generations as we move forward, but
Mm,
you've got different people in the business now that have got a different outlook. They're not
yeah.
just you know life and death, life sciences people. They've come from other industries, which does help as well.
Agreed. So health equity, I think, is the next thing we're going to touch on, and then we're going to get a bit more people centric. So we'll cover the generational differences in a moment. So health equity is something that's been on the radar of a lot of executives for the last year or two, more so for the long term, but in a really big way, it's been on their radar. And I think we found one really particularly quite terrifying stat, didn't we? So nearly 80% of patients who participate in clinical trials in the UK are white, and less than 20% of approved drugs have data that evaluated the treatments, benefits, or side effects on black patients. When you consider that and the implication to real world data, that is such disparity between what we'd kind of expect to have at this moment in time, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the CROs are starting to address this now. We're starting to see, even from our point of view on
Mm,
FarmiWeb, just recruitment, LATAM is really starting to take off. Mexico being the hub for that, because the other parts of LATAM are a little bit politically
yes.
not as stable. But the other big one, which I've been keeping an eye on for some time, is Africa. We know that a number of companies are looking at setting up hubs in South Africa as a sort of start point. It's on the
Mm,
coast, it's easy to get to. People are very, very keen in Africa to get involved in clinical trials. And in actual fact, they see it as, part of their social responsibility to do so. So I think we're going to see a lot more going on there as well. And obviously, we're seeing India growing a lot bigger now. We're seeing APAC getting bigger.
mm.
Just recently, a lot of work happening in Cambodia. So it's interesting to see that the market is starting to change and people are starting to think a little bit bigger. But, recruiting patients for clinical trials has always been difficult. And, predominantly in Europe, most people are, you know, white.
Mm.
So you're always going to get more. But I think, we need more diversity. We need to know what's really happening with some of these products and making sure that the trials are done not only ethically, but with the right
Mm.
sort of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a glimmer of hope in that Spain currently is leading the way in European
Yeah.
clinical trials. Naturally, Spain's quite a diverse part of Europe, so that's going to be hopefully improving these numbers in a way that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So demographics is the next one we wanted to talk about, and we've spoken about this in some iteration on a couple of different webinars, haven't we? But
Yeah.
the key one, and this is still an ongoing thing, and it has been for a while, is the number of retirees is way higher than the number of new workers coming into our industry. 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day currently on a global level. Terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. I think the biggest thing here is, and a lot of companies are thinking about this multi-generational workforce, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Mm,
But it's how do you replace that experience of those types of people who are senior people. They've been around a long time. They understand how the industry works. They've got a great amount of knowledge that they can pass to forward. And one of the things that I've been working with a number of management teams on is utilizing those people when they're retiring, and rather than them just walking away from the business, going down to 3 days, 2 days, 1 day. So they have a tail off period, whether that starts earlier or finishes earlier, it doesn't matter, but you need to use those people for mentoring. So if you look at millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, all of them consider mentoring to be really important for them to actually help them move forward. Especially if you're trying to replace, C-suite people, people that are actually on the border of that, we've got to do something to support them and bring them forward. And I think a lot of companies are thinking along that sort of line. So rather than just retire, it's retire over a period of time and support the rest of the workforce whilst you're doing it. And I think we're going to see mentoring coming in literally from day one with some categories of people as well. Not all, but we're certainly with some.
Yeah, I think so too. I think when you bring someone into the business, you generally have a good vibe if they're gonna go far. You can tell this person's got the aptitude for leadership, they've got the aptitude for executive work in the C-suite eventually, and you'll be able to fast trail them onto these early management programs kind of from day dot, won't you? To be able to make sure that they get the skills, get the people management skill, because that's the thing that you can't really teach that quickly. It's how to manage people. So I think it's important to get that from day one.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one, generational differences. Yeah, we've touched on that a few times over the last few slides, so we'll cover this kind of in detail now. But the key stat that I wanted to cover here is in a recent survey of Gen Z and millennials regarding stress and anxiety, 46% of Gen Z and 39% of millennials said they feel stressed most or all of the time at work. So are they really ready to jump into the stress of this career advancement that we're just talking about? Are they going to be able to get into these high pressure jobs? And again, this is a very sweeping generalistic statement. I appreciate there will be millennials and Gen Z people in this call in this industry who don't feel that way, 60% of them. But it's quite an alarming stat, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a lot of research on this. There's been a lot of talk about it recently. I think a lot of it, when you're looking at it from a psychology point of view, is tech overload. People are on 24/7. They've got tech that allows them to do that. I think the threat of burnout for people is very, very high. And I think all organizations need to really start looking at this because it will start to come very, very soon. To the point where some of the management teams I've been working with have set up buddying systems, they've set up mentoring systems, they've got internal first aiders that are responsible for a number of people, calling them on a weekly basis, doing things like when you're in Teams calls, turning off your video is not acceptable. People want to have the video once you're engaged, or
it's
even
let me see your hands thing.
Yeah.
That was
Stop
the good
working,
one.
start talking and engage. And then other things are things like, when you are managing people, if you're working remotely, actually physically go and meet them, go for a walk in the park and spend a bit of time just talking. And I think that's the biggest bit that's going to relieve this stress at work. No one wants anyone to go into burnout because they've been working too hard or making themselves work too hard. And I think most people would respect that. I think there's a good 10, maybe 15% of people that are working too hard and feel that they have to because they've got this benefit from working from home. And they're not getting that, water cooler moment, which is just saying, how are you actually feeling? And I think that's a very, very serious thing. The other thing is, you're talking about, when you're going from baby boomers right the way down to Gen Z, these are very, very different people. Gen Z and younger millennials especially have a certain expectancy as to what they expect from a job, from a role, from the company, and those types of things. And I think you need to manage them very differently to Gen X and baby boomers that are actually tailing out and going from the industry. But everyone has a role within the organization and they should all be mentoring up and down. And I think that ability to manage people is probably going to be one of the biggest ones because people want to move too quickly in their career and they're being given that opportunity just to keep them in a place. People need to spend the time it takes to actually understand the role properly and fully and be able to manage people efficiently before they move on to the next role rather than fast tracking people. There's too much fast tracking going on. It's putting salaries out of kilter. It's putting people out of kilter. And unfortunately, it's causing some of this stress, I believe, as well.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Everything's moving very quickly.
Yeah.
So talent is probably the final thing we're going to touch on today. We're in the midst of talent acquisition here in PharmiWeb, aren't we? We speak to HR teams, TA teams, recruitment consultants, business owners, and everything in between. Rec tech as well. It is a very interesting time. And what we're seeing is most of the recruitment in the industry is currently being run in-house by talent acquisition teams, and some agencies are struggling to find their place in that dynamic, aren't they, Vince?
Yeah, they are. And I think times move on. I think you can't just be a regular agency anymore. You've got to offer more than that. You've got to
Yeah.
understand what's going on, especially around fraudulent candidates. You need to wrinkle those out, find out who they are, make sure don't supply those to your clients. And it's one of the things that can actually benefit a client for actually using it. The other thing that I think the recruitment agencies are really good at is more senior people, moving those people around, talking to them properly about the role, actually consulting with them as to what they're looking for. Because the big buzzword in the industry now when I'm talking to senior talent acquisition people is they want to recruit the best person for the role, but the best person might not be the right person. You might not need that perfect person that's right for the job role now. You might want someone who's going to be ready for that job in about a year's time. So you've got some time for them to work into the role to actually get more skills and develop. And we're
Mm.
starting to see a lot more of that now. So it's not necessarily the best person who is the best person, it's the right person who's the best person. And that will actually start to give you some sort of sustainability. More importantly, it helps with succession planning. You're bringing people in because someone else is going to move. So I think HR and talent acquisition are actually starting to work a little bit closer strategically to think about, okay, who do we actually need? Where are they going to go? Where's this person going to go? Where's that person going to go? They've all got, talent pathways as to where people go in their career. And it's actually thinking about that a lot more about the individual. So it's becoming almost like a personalized career path for every single employee.
Completely right. So that kind of brings us to the end of the content that we had to share with you. Very aware of the time. So if anyone has to jump off for another call, let us know. We'll send you the recording if you want it, send you the slides. But I wanted to kind of finish off, I guess, with your final thoughts, Vince, on everything we discussed today. What stands out the most to you?
Yeah, well, obviously there's a lot in the document that we're sending out. There's a lot of information that's gone on to that document, and this is just the start point of what we're going to be doing more regularly, as Simon's already said. To me, we need to get this political situation sorted out, both for Europe, for the UK, and for the USA, because that really affects us as well. And depending who gets in and what those leaders decide to do will make a big difference, especially when we're talking about inflation and the economy and investment. Because if we don't
Mm.
get the interest rates down, companies aren't going to be able to get the money they need. At the moment, most investment is being done short term because no one wants to take the risk. The biotechs, R&D functions, they need long-term investment to bring those products to market so we can keep moving around and moving things on. And then the biggest one for me, and the one that's scaring me the most really when I'm looking at the industry as a whole, is this multi-generational workforce and how do you manage that workforce? And I think we've gone through a little period of maybe a year, 18 months where we've not had the right managers managing, younger people.
Mm.
And I think that started to now eradicate itself and starting to settle down. But you need to think about manager each group very, very differently because it's really important that you get that right. So I'm starting to see a lot more of that, and I think it's obviously managing new people's expectations. I was talking to a client the other day who said that they got a graduate in that was looking for 30k, a car, benefits package, wanted to negotiate on more holiday. I hadn't even started. So
Mm.
maybe making it very clear at the outset what they're likely to get and what they'd like to expect, and earn the right to some of those things before we give them to them on the plate. Because obviously we're just inflating salaries all over the place to accommodate people, which I don't think is the right thing to do. So
Yeah.
back to you then, Simon. What do you think? Because we've talked about a lot of these things
We
regularly.
have. I think the thing that still jumps out at me the most is health equity. The disparity in the data between different races, minority groups, and such. It really shocked me in this day and age. Still, so I think I like the fact that a lot of pharmaceutical companies now are insisting on real world data, a decent spread across different people from different backgrounds, different everything, that's really good. And a lot of pharmaceutical companies are now enforcing that. So, they'll work with a clinical trial, a clinical research organization on the proviso that they do this. And I think that's a really, really good shift because we want to make medicine and healthcare accessible to everybody. So we need to try it with everybody to make sure it is accessible. And I think it's one of those things that's taken a long time to get to where it is. And I only see it getting better. Also, the workforce demographics is something that I think about on a daily basis, to be honest. Mentorship, training, and how we can fill the skills gap that's being created by 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. Sorry, reaching 65 every single day. That's the key thing in the note. They're not all retiring at 65. But we've got to fill that gap. And currently, if we carry on this way, that's not going to look great. So we do need to kind of pick it up when it comes to things like L&D, when it comes to scouting the right people to lead the industry in the future. And then finally, for me, it's talent. It's what we do every day. Skills and culture fit, overcoming everything more so. You go back a couple of years, people were looking for 10 CRAs. We need 10 CRAs. We need them now to do this. Now they're kind of saying we haven't got the money for that, but we need 5. But we need them to be really, really good. I find that the bar has risen in terms of what talent people are looking for, quite high. And I think it's a very interesting time to be in the industry that we're in. That's for sure.
Right. Okay.
So this obviously is the last webinar of now. We're about to go in sort of a summer break, is what I'm trying to say. And then we'll be back in September. September, October, November, we'll have 3 new webinars. They'll be up on the site for you to pre-register for relatively soon. But if there is anything that you would like us to cover, never be afraid to ping us an email and say, I want to know more about regulatory changes, or I want to know more about Gen Z, whatever it is. Just ask the question. We could probably deliver something. And if you liked this format, if you felt like the industry trends format works as a quarterly thing, let us know, because obviously we'd like to do it, but we want to make sure it's useful in some way before we commit to it. We've done a load of webinars in the past. If you want any of these, you can go onto our webinars page, you can download them, you can watch them from there. And if you have any other questions or need anything else at all, such as the recording, the report that we've been referencing throughout this call, which is this one here, whatever it is, you can email us sales@PharmiWeb.com and we'll be able to get it over to you. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for turning up today. Really appreciate it, because it is incredible. I think I'd rather be outside as well. So thank you for turning up. Vince, anything to finish on?
No, I just think we're hoping that everything's going to sort of get back to where it should be by September, and we'll have a great summer break. That's it, really.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take good care and see you on the next one. Thanks, Alexis. That's made my day. That's great.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks, Francis.
Thank you, everybody. Take good care.